So welcome to all of you. We have more than 470 people registered for this event from 84 countries, so that shows the importance given to that topic. My name is Florian Kadlitz. I work for the European Training Foundation as a Human Capital Development Specialist. And I want to give a very brief technical introduction to you. If we could move to slide 2. The participants following via Zoom are able to choose the language they will follow that event in. If you go to the bottom of your screen, you will see a little globe saying interpretation. There you can choose between English, Russian, French, Spanish, and Arabic. And you can also mute yourself, and I kindly ask you to do that and to keep your cameras on. Please rename yourself using the function you have in the Zoom application with the first name and with the country. The event will be recorded in all the languages, so you will be able to share that recording later on with colleagues. And if you have any questions, please use the chat function. So without any further delay, I would kindly ask now the 4 opening speakers to open the event. I will first give the word to Mr. Cesare Onestini, the Director of the European Training Foundation. Cesare, please, the word is yours.
Thank you. Welcome to everybody to this event jointly organized by the European Training Foundation and the ILO. It's a pleasure for me to open the event together with my good friend Srinivas and with the representatives from ETUC and the IOE. It's I think a great opportunity to open up this conversation. Lifelong learning is now a shared goal for the reforms of education and training systems around the globe. We have seen that lifelong learning has also been highlighted as even more of a need when we face the challenges of the pandemic and they need to accelerate the move to learning through other means, digital platforms and others. And we see now that there is a growing investment in education and training, and the question of lifelong learning is there. But we also know that lifelong learning by itself is not enough to ensure equitable access to learning opportunities. And what are the main challenges to ensure this equitable access? The main challenges is that jobs are changing faster, as we have seen over the past few years, and across the board, all professions are concerned. At the same time, there are more learning opportunities and there are options to personalize the learning, but how to choose and how to navigate all of these options. So the shift is towards more choice, in many cases, to individuals to empower them, but this choice is also a daunting choice. It's difficult to know how the job markets are evolving in front of us and how individuals can make the best choices for themselves. That's why the focus on national or structured but general career development support systems is even more necessary than ever today. And we need to accompany this paradigm shift with an approach to revamping this career development support, learning from the best experiences. We need to see how we can make career enriching choices all along one's learning and working life. Making choices is not a once in a lifetime, maybe as it was in the past moment, but it accompanies the lifelong learning perspective that we are building in our learning societies. We need to also take more into account the personal strengths, the personal inclinations. We need to connect them better to the global trends, but also to the realities which is present in the local and regional environments. This is even more important when mobility options are more limited. And this varies very much from country to country, but it's essential that this is taken into account. And ultimately, we need to diversify the career development support systems to meet the different needs of individuals. If we want to personalize this approach to career development choices, we also need to take into account the different starting points of individuals and their strengths and weaknesses. So how do we achieve this? And I think that's why the seminar today is so important. We need to put together many pieces of the puzzle. We have them all, but we need to put them together. And if we don't put them together right, it doesn't really work. And that's why we need to put together the contribution from the public authorities, private sector, from the civil society, social partners, essential to the conversation. And we need to make all of these understandable and easy to access, easy to navigate for individuals. We in the European Training Foundation have a mandate to support human capital development in partner countries, and we see this as closely connected to the need to also support career development as an essential component to reach this goal of promotion of lifelong learning. As you know, in the European Union, we have one of the key competencies in the competence frameworks. This life comp includes also the ability to make the right choices for one's career. And as you know, we have this framework of the Sustainable Development Goals that also points us in this direction and the importance of career development. So together with the ILO and also together with the interagency TVET group, we have produced advice that is available on investing and career guidance. We have the joint report, ETF-ILO, on how to support system level approaches in order to make this transformation happen. And we have done it because we have seen that it works. When we take this system level approach, it works, and it works for individuals. So it's an investment which has returns, immediate returns and long-term returns. We in ETF, together with ILO, will use this framework also to carry out review of national support strategies. And my colleague Florian will say a bit more, I think, in the course of the seminar. But we will also continue working on this throughout our work on networks of excellence, our monitoring approaches. And for us in ETF, it's one of the strands on which we'll keep building. This is a shared responsibility, and it's a great pleasure to have you all here. From ETF, you have our full commitment to continuing with this important part of the work to have lifelong learning societies. Thank you, Florian.
Thank you very much, Cesare, for these opening words. I will directly hand over to the Chief of the Skills and Employability Branch of the International Labour Organization, Mr. Srinivas Reddy. It's yours. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Florian. Thank you to all the colleagues and welcome, friends. Let me join my very good friend Cesare, Director of the ETF, in also welcoming all of you for this very timely and important webinar on the career development. As most of you are aware, I also would like to acknowledge the strong support and participation of the employers and workers representatives. We have both the IOE and ITC colleagues as well. ILO has a long-standing commitment with career development support. As most of you may have consulted, career development support is covered in ILO standards as early as in 1948 under the Employment Service Convention number 88. In fact, we at the ILO see career development support as a way to empower people to have their awareness and choices within a framework of social justice that encourages mutual responsibility on behalf of workers, employers, and the state. It is important also to realize that it's not an add-on to do existing policies for education, training, and employment. But career development is a key component that enables individual access to learning and decent work, increases overall quality, and contributes to efficient use of resources. The ILO's Human Resource Development Recommendation number 142 encourages the parallel development of training systems and career guidance. Career development support should be at the heart of lifelong learning systems. Activities relating to career guidance will play a very key role in helping bringing forth a better new normal after the COVID pandemic, as Cesare has already covered it. In fact, the economic recovery will require massive skilling and reskilling of people because many people will have to change not only jobs, but also even sectors, starting whole new activities. This implies timely advice and guidance is very, very important. Understanding successful pathways to finding a new future and livelihoods will imply understanding training options and the best career shifts. Many of the ones who were most affected by the COVID crisis will need to be especially supported. Women who are more affected by job losses, where the greatest potential for labor market participation and career prospects are. Young people also very affected. They will need to understand what can be their future and how to devise a long-term career strategy in a market that offers uncertainty and atypical forms of work. So in addition to supporting the school to work transition, but the multiple transitions that the people have to undertake in their career throughout the active life, career development and career guidance is an important part, and therefore I think it has to be an integral part of the entire provision of skills development and post skills development support. Similarly, the transition to a more sustainable and digitally strong economy will need to be inclusive. The current structural transformations should not be made at the expense of the most vulnerable, who will need to be able to know and access good opportunities. What we have also experienced during the pandemic, the huge digital divide that has separated the world, a world that can telework and a world that cannot telework, a world that can go to online learning, but a world that has no access to go to online learning. So these additional provisions will have to be proactively positioned so that the digital divide is reduced and bridged, and everyone will have the access to new technologies. Incentives to digitalization and green technologies should be aligned to support a good career development practices in enterprises and provision of career guidance to adults that promote access to new roles and occupations. Finally, colleagues, not only technical skills are important, but career development practices can help build skills and attitudes, otherwise we call core skills or transversal skills, soft skills, that will help forge socially responsible attitudes at work, promotive, inclusive and ecologically aware workplaces. So this is an important movement for us also at the ILO, as we are passing through a very important deliberations on skills development. ILO member states, along with employers and workers organizations from all the 187 countries, would be meeting next month at the International Labour Conference Part 2, starting on 25th November for 2.5 months. And this particular International Labour Conference will deal with the skills and lifelong learning through a general discussion. And we are expecting that several aspects, including the skills and lifelong learning, which will be discussed, and we will receive guidance from our member states also on the career guidance related aspects. ILO, we are very glad that we have, in joint partnership with ETF, published a partnership on a methodology for career development systems already applied in 4 countries to support the development of national strategies and plans. We have also just published a global framework on core skills for life and work in the 21st century that depicts career management skills as a subset, indicating the structure role for the skills development programs of all types. So we are intensifying the development of tools for the capacity enhancement of employability and youth employability services. This webinar is very timely, and we are very excited to learn from these deliberations And I want to thank you all for joining this seminar and wishing all the best to all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. And you could hear from these first two opening notes that the importance of career development given by the two organizations is really high. But I'm very happy that we're having also social partners with us today, laying out their position regarding the strategic role of career development support in building lifelong learning systems and in achieving desirable impacts during economic recovery and regarding the promotion of decent work. I will first give the word to Tim Noonan. Welcome. He's representing the International Trade Union Confederation. Tim, please.
Thank you, Florian, and it's great to be able to talk to such a large number of people on this very, very important issue. I would like to make my comments in the context of three big topics internationally, and two of those are already crises, and one of them is potentially trending towards a crisis if we don't deal with it. The first crisis is obviously the question of the environment and global heating. The COP26 will meet soon. We're seeing a lot of commitments, some of them real, some of them just on paper by governments. We're seeing demand from employers, from workers, from civil society for action. And we have to find pathways to net zero, and we have to accelerate action up to 2030. We know that requires solidarity globally, and it requires determination. And it requires investment in infrastructure for decarbonisation, for mitigation of the impacts of climate change, and for habitat and sort of wildlife restoration. This means lots of jobs. Those investments must bring lots of jobs, and the pathway to net zero must be a job-rich pathway. It cannot be one without that. Jobs, that requires learning, it requires education, it requires skills upgrading, but it also, very importantly, requires the tractors, the gears that are going to connect people to the employment opportunities, the new ones that are emerging, and that are going to support them through transition within existing jobs. And this is where career guidance and development are absolutely crucial. There's little point in training people for lots of new jobs and having lots of new jobs if there's no way for those two ends to meet. The second big topic, which I'd like to briefly address, is the question of technological change and digitalization. And we know there are massive changes underway, and if we don't manage those changes in the correct way, and if we continue down the kind of data oligarch pathway that the world is currently on, then the technological challenges could easily turn into a crisis. I've been with CEOs in the tech industry. We talk to them about how do they handle the issue of so-called artificial intelligence, which I think is a misnomer. It's machine learning. And they say with the utmost caution, we want to be very careful what we may unleash on the world. There are enormous risks in this, but there are obviously massive opportunities. And that requires the kind of social dialogue and partnership, collective bargaining, industrial policy by governments, to ensure that we make the best of technological evolution, and that we mitigate or eliminate the downside risks. I just want to give one very quick example of this, and it's an example of the field that one of my daughters works in. In the past, in the field of protein chemistry and biochemistry, sometimes a whole PhD would be written on how a particular protein folds into the active protein that plays a role in a biological system. For example, a human body. Could be 3, 4, 5 years of study. That can now be done in a day using DeepMind and other applications. So we know that these things are moving very fast. We know that we need to enable people to develop their skills in existing jobs, and again, also to take up the new jobs that are emerging. Hence, lifelong learning, career development are absolutely vital. In the technological area, I just want to emphasize that these are questions of choice. Traditionally, over the years, over the centuries, every technological advancement has brought a net increase in employment. That's not written in stone, nor is it written in data centers. That's a matter of choice that we have to make for ourselves. And the third, of course, is the obvious crisis today of the pandemic, which has brutally exposed fault lines in the global economy, the injustices and inequities that we can see right in front of us today. We only need to look at the issue of vaccine availability to understand the gravity of those inequities and the massive challenge to the human solidarity that's going to be required if we're going to overcome and live with this current pandemic and adjust to future pandemics. We in the ITC, we don't talk about a post-pandemic scenario. This virus is with us forever, and there will be new pandemics. So,
sorry to interrupt you. We're a bit short of time already. If you could round up, please.
I'll round up very quickly now. The pandemic has cost more than 100 million jobs, mostly of women. More than 100,000 care workers have lost their lives. So it's that investment in care and that's an investment in resilience that must also be part of the solution. And there again, lifelong learning, career development and career support are absolutely crucial. Sorry for running over time. Thank you for your attention.
Oh, thank you very much, Tim. I'll directly hand over to Ms. Muriel Antil, representing the International Organization of Employers. Please tell us the position of IOE, and then, because we have a very rich program, we have to be a bit harsh with the time. Thank you, Muriel.
Thank you so much, Florian, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to be part of the conversation and bringing in my practitioner experience of working with workers and employers, but also as an author of a recent study around the impact of career guidance on specific work transitions. So I hope to bring in, the practitioner or the down the ground perspective as well into these conversations. I think I won't repeat what my esteemed colleagues on this conversation have beautifully already explained around what's happening outside. I think career coaching, career guidance has a key role to play, and as Tim was just saying, transformation being on the environmental side or tech side is happening and having a huge impact on jobs, and these need to happen with people and not to people, and that's what I would be concentrating on talking about or bringing today. Before I go into the detail, it's important to mention that what we mean by career guidance and coaching. So typically, guidance and coaching are not the same, but are used in complement to each other, because it will vary depending on the needs, whether it's in external transition, people leaving their organization, whether they are supported while they are employed, and that's very much so the case when we're talking about transformation. So organization, employers transforming and reorienting, enabling their workers to evolve within an organization, or thirdly, whether they are moving from unemployment back into employment. So it's what is very important to us is that it's not just about the job search. It's not just about guiding a person into another job, but it's really encompassing the person's strengths, aspiration, mindset to enable them. And per se, this is building resilience. So from our work with 500,000 people we support every year at LHH, we have learned that career guidance is a sustainable accelerator. So let me just give you three quick examples before I finish on our position. 7 in 10 successful worker rate an immediate start of career guidance, career transition as a game changer for their success. But also from our research recently done on the two unique large-scale skilling incentives programs in Singapore and France, we know that career guidance can enable people to lifelong learning. And we actually found out that workers receiving career coaching are 3 times more likely to engage in skilling, which is a huge number if we think about it as enabling a lifelong learning mindset. And the third piece that I would, if you allow me, as a Swiss person, I have a passion for hiking, and you know, the way I look at a career orientation overall is like when you're doing a hiking, equipping a hiker with a good backpack, with something to eat, some great gears, right? The skilling that they have, even those adapted to, you know, the proper terrain, will not get them necessarily to a destination, because without a map or a compass, the hiker will likely get lost in the way, particularly if the environment is so smoky as it looks these days. So of course, you know, enabling the hiker along the way is not just getting them right one destination, but actually giving them equipping or enabling them to be more resilient. And that's what I would finish on in saying that, you know, the overall objective for career guidance frameworks should be focusing on building resilience, and it starts with empowering, enabling the workers and all of us, actually every single individual, in their mindset to embrace the new, you know, move away from a linear and career for life thinking, but embrace these lifelong learning mindsets, and for employers to move from a sustainable engagement to a sustainable engagement model, away from thinking about workforce as replaceable and where fire and hire are the main principles. And also for public institutions to move towards a cooperative model where, you know, appeal to, well, I would make an appeal here to have a discussion around jumping over their own shadow to work with private companies, because a better collaboration, a more effective collaboration, because collaborations is happening at many places, but a even more effective collaboration between private and public offering in this area is critical to reach the right people. And as was you know, mentioned at the beginning by Cesare, I think, you know, diversify the system and making sure we capture all people who need support, and there are many. These are the key ingredients.
Thank you very much, Muriel. Thank you very much to the 4 opening speakers. I'm handing over to my colleague, Raimo Vuorinen, to continue the moderation of the first panel. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Florian, for the introduction and invitation to facilitate this panel. The global interest for career guidance that we heard from the previous presentation is partly emerged by the series of international reviews on career guidance policies conducted by OECD, ETF, ZF, and World Bank during the last 2 decades. And last summer, building on these reviews, the European Training Foundation and ILO launched a joint publication developing national career development support systems, pathways to enhance lifelong career guidance, career education, and career development support for workers. And this publication re-emphasized the importance of conducting national system reviews for building evidence-based, coordinated, coherent, and successful national support systems. And the publication outlines 5 key cornerstones for such systems that need to be developed in accordance with local context and conditions. And these 5 cornerstones are coordination, access, funding, quality, and the use of technology. And these 5 cornerstones are also in line with agreed global targets, which related to guarantee of universal access to education, training, and decent work, as reflected by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And this panel, we will focus specifically on these 5 cornerstones, and in particular on the experience of reforms along these cornerstones that have had positive outcomes in different countries. And we have 5 examples. From Vietnam, we have Ms. Nguyen Thi Hien, who is the National Project Coordinator in ILO Country Office in Vietnam. And then from Korea, we have Ji Yeon Lee. from Korean Research Institute for Vocational Education and Training, CRIVET, and from Belgium, Flanders, from Public Employment Services, we have Mr. David Mermans, and from Serbia, Mr. Marko Bankovic from Tempus Foundation, and then from Jordan, we have Ms. Iman Alarai and Ms. Kishore Singh, who represent a Mehnati project. And we go straightly to Vietnam. And Mrs. Thi Hien, could you elaborate in next 7 minutes? So each of the speakers will have 7 minutes to highlight some of the key issues in their countries and experiences in their country. So Ms. Thi Hien, can you elaborate what are the latest developments in getting guidance on the policy agenda and getting policy interest in guidance in Vietnam? I hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I would like to share you some information about career development in Vietnam. So if we look at the policy level, we can see that development career development, we do not have that term in policy. But in terms of career development, we have the career education. Career education it now appear in all the law, like a law of education, or recently in the vocational education training strategy, national strategy for vocational education and training. And it stopped a lot at career education activities. For the career development for the workers who already join in the labor market, in theory, it should be the service should be provided by the public employment service centers, but that service in the regulation they have a service, but in reality they do not provide those kind of service in this public employment service central system. So in very briefly look at the policy level, we can see that in Vietnam, education, career education become now officially appear in legislative system, and it go, but it really recently. If we look back 5 years ago, it did not appear. But since 2018, when Prime Minister signed that decision about the career education for the young people who are at the general education system, the career education become the hot topic. However, the problem, there's a gap between the policy and the implementation is that after they have a policy, they do not have any tools or toolbox to implement the career education at the general education system level. So that's why ILO at that moment, we support a toolbox for the young people from 14 to 18 years old. And we apply the theory of Gardner about multiple intelligence in career guidance. And after that, we collaborated with some social enterprise to develop other tools. And next year, as I know from the Ministry of Education, next year, this is the first ever, they will publish the book on career guidance at high school level, and they will use ILO document, especially the dictionary of the jobs that ILO produce will be officially used in the system of general education for the career education. That is the first gaps we see in the career guidance when they implement at the high school level, at the general education level. The second gaps is the mindset of even the teachers who are working, who provide the career education. Of course, they lack of the tools, but they lack of the background to be a career education people. And assist in the whole system, they haven't no professional, not yet have a professional career teachers who really function only like a career counselor at the general education system level.
Thank you. There are many progress going on in your country, but could you please highlight what was the added value of the recent reform you had in Vietnam in sort of a moving progress? This is like a short comment on that as well.
Yeah, very short comment. Like we work on ILO in Vietnam, work for career guidance for 10 years now. But last year and this year, our work was now appear in the law. So they are officially recognized in the system. So we have a legal backup to continue with the work on career development in general, but focus more on career education. Yeah.
So I was following the national review in Vietnam, so it seemed that it was an opportunity to bring together the stakeholders to put guidance on the agenda. So I think I congratulate Vietnam on this progress. Thank you. So we move on to Korea. Ms. Lee, can you describe what are the latest developments in coordination and governance of career development support in Korea? Because I'm aware that you had also some sort of a stronger mandate on guidance during the last years. So I hand over to you.
Okay. Hello, my name is Jioni from Korea. My question is about coordination and governance. So in Korea, the most recent coordination and governance of career development support in Korea is the establishment of National Career Development Center in Korea. The National Career Development Center was established in the KRIPAT under the Career Education Act. Let me briefly introduce the nature of National Research Institute of KRIPAT. Unlike other countries, Korea has about 30 national research institutes under the Prime Minister. These state-run research institutes are not located under one ministry, but independently under the Prime Minister. So, therefore, instead of unconditional yes to the request of one ministry, it collects opinions from various ministries, listens to the opinions of policy consumers, and adjusts to the career development support policy so that it is not biased toward the needs and positions of one ministry. It is the role of the state-run research institute, KRIPAT, to coordinate opinions between ministries, discover gaps between the field and policy, and synthesize them to the complete policy report. So NCDC, National Career Development Center, was established in this National Research Institute, the KRIPAT. So back to the main topic, I will talk about NCDC's coordination and governance. The National Career Development Center was established at KRIPAT, a national research institute, and this center is in charge of all R&D related to career education as a center specified in the Career Education Act. At this time, career education refers to career education that includes not only career education provided in the school curriculum, but also all of them throughout their lives, including adults. The budget is mainly received by Ministry of Education, but can also be received by the Ministry of Employment and the Provincial Office of Education. According to my experience as the first NCDC director, we do policy development, program development, and fact-finding surveys necessary to support career development are conducted. And these findings do not just end with only paper printing. In the case of developed career guidance program, for example, it is delivered to each school through the Provincial Office of Education. Although it is a top-down method, it has the advantage of spreading at a very remarkable rate in executing programs or policies. In order to effectively coordinate, the research process of NCDC must reflect the various voices of policymakers and continue to conduct research through close connection with stakeholders, school field teachers, students, or parents. Having this process can ensure the efficiency of policies and programs we have developed. In summary, it can be said that the function of National Research Institute in charge of coordination and governance functions, and it conducts a survey on consumer needs to support career development, develops career development programs based on the result of the survey, confirms the validity of the programs, and spread them to ministries, Ministry Office of Education, and union schools. But, however, it cannot be said that what we do is perfect in all areas. Obviously, we must work to break the boundaries between ministries, but sometimes they cannot be linked to each other due to barriers between ministries. How different ministries and stakeholders cooperate and coordinate toward one goal to support career development is an ongoing task that we must continue to strive for. To this end, this year, CRIPAD is promoting a policy study called the National Career Guidance Safety Net. Raimo, may I speak how I make the promote this study in connection with the next year questions?
Yeah, I was planning to ask how was this possible, because I admire this sustainable mandate and what you have. So briefly, how was this possible?
Yes. In the pandemic situation in Korea government, the career development support was virtually shrinking as the government focused on expanding public funds and creating public jobs due to the COVID issues and economic difficulties, rather than supporting career development. So we, NCDC, we proposed a project called the National Career Guidance Safety Net with the NCDC researchers who share the awareness of this problem in this area. In order to carry out the project, ministries and institutions with budget, we persuade them the importance of this project. This project conducted a full review of career guidance functions operated by elementary, secondary education, higher education level, lifelong learning institutions, vocational training institutions, and public employment service. As a result, we have reflected on the fact that there has been a bias that emphasizes only career guidance centered on the school age class. And we are drawing research that we should strengthen the safety net for all education and training institutions to receive their career guidance.
Thank you.
One more. Through this research process, we have expanded the consensus that career development support is the heart of lifelong learning. And at the same time, career development support is also the heart of lifelong working. Thank you.
Thank you. This seems that you were able to start from the outcomes and how guidance can be a sort of solution to national challenges. Now we move to Belgium and Belgium Flanders Public Employment Services, and we are going to hear about financing and the system of vouchers. So, Mr. Meulemans, can you describe what is the main idea behind the vouchers in Belgium Flanders?
Thank you, Raimo, to have this opportunity and to pitch this career guidance vouchers, because it's the full name. And I'm going to introduce those two components, career guidance and career vouchers. First, let me explain. In Flanders, career guidance already exists since 2002, and it is for a service targeting employees and self-employed. I'm from the PES Flanders. We have many other services for unemployed, but this one is a work-to-work transition one. Just bear that in mind. Now, what is a career guidance? A career guidance is a proactive instrument to avoid dropouts and to prevent unemployment. Career guidance wants to address a myriad of possible problems, such as not knowing what plans you have in your career, not knowing what your skills you are, your values, your interests, your talents, burnout, a lifelong balance, problems with colleagues, and so on. So it's wide, but always related to the work environment. Not life. That's the delineation we make. In 2000, there was already an existing career guidance. In 2013, we established the career voucher, and the person became the director of this instrument. The idea behind the career voucher was that it is a demand-driven incentive to challenge the citizen for their intrinsic motivation, and all the citizens who has a question at that moment about their career. So every citizen in Flanders since 2013 is entitled to 2 vouchers of 4 hours every 6 years career guidance. Of course, the career guidance is in a duration time of 3 or 4 months. It's not those 3 hours, one after the other. The general right of this citizen is legally embedded, and it's approved by the politicians and the social parties. Now, next is this main goal. Let's go into this voucher aspect and which benefits it has. Next to this main goal that it provides demand-driven, there are 6 other benefits, and I will sum them up. First of all, the citizen has a choice to go to the supplier he wants. He even has a free of charge first interview, so he can hop to one and the other before he enter actually the career guides. That's very important. Another one is that the citizen, he can choose at the moment of its needs. And that's also important. There's a whole way before he actually entered this career guidance and doubting and so on. But at the moment he says, I need it, he go for it. And citizen is entitled to have 2 vouchers. And he can either take them separately, or either he can combine them as a whole along. The career voucher is digital, so that means other benefits such as an easy access and a fast process of receiving the voucher, and as well also fast processes of payment for the suppliers. Then it has relatively low staff costs. And then last but not least, you can combine, or you can integrate a personal contribution. I want to point this one. So a personal contribution in Flanders, the citizen themselves pay 10 euros for 1 hour. But this personal contribution, you can vary in it. It is important. This personal contribution makes the user much more involved to the whole process. If you have a service free of charge, then you take risks, cancellation of the appointments, not doing their homework, and so on. So with the involvement on the whole process, they doing, and even we see in other domains that this personal contribution already works with €1 for 1 hour. So you can vary it in it. Okay. Next to the voucher as well, we combined it with an outsourcing and a quality assurance to the suppliers. I'm not going to end this, it would take too long. Then the other question you asked to reply.
Yeah, but you mentioned that it's demand-driven and also it's one flexible way of funding. So
Yes.
can you elaborate those countries who might be planning for vouchers? What might be the pros and cons for this system to consider?
Well, I already explained the benefits. There are also challenges, we call them, instead of contras.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, in this case, it works. A voucher, you have to indicate a very strict service. Another thing is, since we established this voucher, we had a tremendous boom of suppliers. We didn't expect this. That means the quality assurance, which I was not going into it, needs to be very forcefully. And so we put on straight the definition of the career vouchers. And it was a boom of, as well as career centers and subcontracting. And we are director of the career center, but they are the director of the subcontractors. So it's an open market. You see, and in an open market, you also have some disadvantages because you actually it is a financial substitute or incentive, demand-driven, but then you have to recover this with a severe quality assurance from above. And we are with the team to build this up, and we have now layer by layer made this quality assurance. Now, the other point and question you want to ask is, do vouchers act as a funding incentive to ensure sufficient flexibility? Should I go into that?
I think I'm aware of the time, so we have about 40 minutes for the two remaining speakers. So I thank you at this point. But there's some material available on your or people can contact you on getting more information.
You can contact me, and I will presume a video if you want or more information through your to ILO.
Thank you very much. And now I hand over to Florian. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raimo, and to the speakers so far. I will ask the next question to Mr. Marko Bankovic from the Tempus Foundation in Serbia. What are the latest developments in ensuring quality and continuous improvement through professionalization in Serbia?
Okay, so good morning from Serbia. I will use the next couple of minutes to share our experiences with the development and implementation of national standards for quality of guidance services, which are, in my opinion, a good approach to ensure quality and continuous improvement in guidance systems that are similar to Serbia. And when I say similar to Serbia, I mean that we have had a lot of services developed in the past 10, 15 years through some projects, for example, one that aimed to develop services in primary educations, and then there is a separate for higher education and so on. And it also meant that practitioners often lacked a dedicated course in guidance during their initial education, during their studies, but got trained usually through seminars, continuous professional development trainings, and the like. And in such a context, if we say why are joint, let's say, cross-sectoral standards really important? Well, first of all, this helps put the focus back on joint goals and outcomes across sectors. Namely, that the aim is to support the development of career management skills in users, and then in this way you reaffirm the concept. We reaffirm the concept of career management skills as the cornerstone in all sectors, not only in some. And secondly, standards provide with a framework to assess the services. It also provides the way to identify the gaps and to plan the new developments. And this can evolve in a full accreditation process for guidance providers. And our standards are actually developed so that they can be used in adult education accreditation process. But even if the system is not yet developed to the level that the accreditation of all providers is requested, is needed, the standards can serve not only as self-assessment tools for the providers themselves, but also as evaluation monitoring tools for donors, for funding agencies, and the like. And finally, let's not forget that situation that I described, in which most practitioners in the system, well, let's say with the exception of PES, of Public Employment Service probably, but see themselves professionally primarily, for example, as a teacher or as a youth worker, psychologist, etc. A clear list of skills and competencies that the guidance practitioner should have is really needed, so that you can, first of all, self-identify as practitioner or guidance practitioner or not, and then to identify what kind of further training, what kind of further skill development and knowledge you need to be a practitioner. And because of this, our standards actually contain separate sections, with one focusing on career management skills and focusing on the user and their development, the other focusing on practitioner competencies, and some other focusing on the actual service provision. So as such, these standards can be used in all sectors, although they are officially enacted by the Minister of Education, and although they are formally, when they were developed, linked to the process of accreditation of adult education providers. So that happened, the enactment happened in 2019, and since then they have been become the part of all the later policies. They have been referred to in the new education agenda strategy 2030, in new policies related to qualification framework, to recognition of prior learning, and it will also be referred to in the upgrade of the national youth strategy. That is the process that is going on at this moment. And also they were introduced in the past through their internal management documents and things like that. So in this way, we can say that there is also a new interface for cross-sectoral cooperation or coordination. Basically, although we do not have a new strategy that we previously developed at the beginning of the last previous decade. So that's on the level of policy, but on a more practical level, we've seen a development of self-evaluation checklists, and they have been really beneficial to users, but also training provision for practitioner for their skills development. Now we can basically say that, for example, our organization sees we have developed some new trainings for social work, for youth work, that we previously didn't have, that also use basis of these standards, but also other providers of training opportunities for practitioners. We all now use these standards when developing our offers, and this is really good, especially because we, as I mentioned, have the situation that if you have some big projects that focus on one system, they might have slightly different methodologies and things like that.
Marco, thank you. This is really interesting. Sorry to interrupt you. I wondered, you put the practitioner at the heart of the quality of provision, and the standards are a good deal to address this, ensuring the quality. I wondered, how did you achieve to develop and agree on those standards? If you could give a very quick answer that we can...
Yeah, I know my time is running out, and I would, shortest thing, it would be to say that to develop cross-sectoral standards such as this one, it's simply not possible if you don't have all the stakeholders involved in the development. So in our case, the group was coordinated by the Institute for the Development of Education, since they were given the mandate by the Ministry of Education, Science and Technological Development. But the working group included other ministries, Ministry of Youth, Ministry of Labor, included representatives of public employment service, of universities, schools, practitioners themselves, and I think that is also an important aspect, but also NGOs. We as foundation supported technically together with Bosch, another NGO, and GIZ projects, and all the other stakeholders. So we really had a mixture of expertise. And at the beginning, it was a bit, let's say, challenging to go maybe sometimes past our own sectors and our own silos. But I think that in the end, through really good collaboration, we managed to have a set of standards that can be implemented in all sectors and can serve as I said, basis for planning, for evaluation, but also for development of new services and the system in total.
Thank you very much, Marco. Very rich experience you could share. I'm happy now to have also Ms. Eman Alarach with us from Jordan. She will present on Menati. Eman, can I ask the first question to you? What are the latest developments related to the online platform Menati in terms of uptake and participation of different groups, training providers, employers, job seekers, regarding funding? Please share with us the latest developments.
Thank you, Florian, and good morning, everyone. Let me just tell you a little bit about Mihnati and where the idea stems from and the development so far. Their focus in Jordan for the past few years has been on reforming the skills development systems at different echelons, and most of the focus has been on TVET provision and strengthening skills governance systems and creating public-private partnerships and promoting lifelong learning. A lot of the ILO interventions in the country really focus on TVET provision and especially in the context of the Syrian crisis, Syrian refugees crisis. But during the pandemic and especially during the lockdown periods, we feel that situation kind of underscored the need for managing the digital transition and really promoting online learning, and perhaps also looking at job creation in the country, especially for youth, and the capacity of the country to create jobs, and maybe the need to look at non-standard forms of work and capitalizing on jobs that are being created elsewhere in the world. Jordan is a bit in a unique situation where the digital divide is somewhat small. The country has really good ICT infrastructure, and especially among the youth population. At the same time, the country suffered some of the highest unemployment rates among youth, with I think it's north of 55% for youth and 70% for young women, and the majority of people who are unemployed are actually university graduates and those with tertiary education. So the Mihnati portal is we call it an employment readiness portal, where it kind of we look at a hybrid of different components that would capacitate and empower young people to take on jobs, whether in the local labor market or through digital platforms. The portal, I can't share my screen, obviously, but I sent a short video on the portal, and be happy to share the link to it as well. But it has, we integrated job fit tests, interactive job fit tests, and personality or psychometric testing to the portal in collaboration with national constituents, and particularly employers and training providers. And then it also aggregates online learning opportunities that are available in the world. So we are, for example, ITC-ILO, learning opportunities or micro-learning opportunities available online through platforms like edX, Coursera, or just general digital platforms, or through universities. And it adopts a sort of a gamification approach where to encourage students to engage with lifelong learning as much as possible.
Apologies to interrupt. I wondered how are you and how will you integrate the platform into existing guidance systems in terms of technical interoperability, but also training of end users and practitioners? Maybe to round up, you could give a brief answer to that, please.
All right. So the platform is currently being developed. We're basically adapting content and localizing content to the local context in collaboration with training providers. The ILO is currently developing it through its own funding. It'll be integrated with existing interventions in the sphere, especially the ILO's work on an e-counseling portal that was done under the program of support in Jordan that focuses on Syrian refugees and host communities. And we're also working very closely with the Ministry of Labor to integrate it as a core tool under the National Employment Program that's currently being designed, which has a specific component that focuses on digital learning, digital employment platforms, and lifelong learning. And we're also working together with other implementing agencies and donors in order to align the work that they're doing and integrating it into the one portal.
Thanks very, very much for sharing that experience. I noticed that we have a couple of questions in the chat in the various languages. What I would propose is, if the speakers are not responding now in the chat while we continue with the event, we will answer the questions in the follow-up email. I'm sorry we cannot have now a group discussion due to time, because it's a very rich program, but I hand over now to Pedro to introduce to the next session. Thank you for your understanding.
Thank you very much, Florian. It is indeed a little bit unfair. There's so many practices of interest and initiatives of interest, and we can only have a little bit of time to display all of them, but there will be the opportunity to continue this dialogue. So this is just the beginning of a fruitful global dialogue at this level. I would like just to take then the opportunity to introduce Mr. Anthony Mann, who's a senior policy analyst at the Directorate for Education and Skills at the OECD. He's going to focus a little bit on the work that the interagency group is developing on this issue of career development, and particularly career guidance. And he's going to focus especially on the recent publication, Investing in Career Guidance. Anthony, over to you.
Thank you so much, Pedro. It's a pleasure to be here. And I thought I'm just going to take 2 or 3 minutes to talk a bit about this leaflet, because it's unusual and it's important. It's not very common for the big international organizations all to work together to can create effectively what's a joint statement. And so the big question is, why are we doing this? Why are we at the OECD, the ILO, the UNESCO, the European Commission, the Education Training Foundation, European Training Foundation, and CEDEFOP all working together in this way? And I think it kind of relates to a number of factors. One is that even before the pandemic, there's growing concern across all these organizations that the labor market was changing in a very radical way because of digitalization, because of growing demand for green jobs, and then because of the pandemic itself, the labor market's become much more turbulent. creating more difficulties, more challenges for young people making decisions about their progression, but also for people in work. We see with digitalization, jobs disappearing, new jobs emerging. And so the need for support and guidance to be able to facilitate that change, and decision-making is much more important than it's been before. And we kind of felt, secondly, that as young people are staying on longer, as young people in work, need to make these more important decisions, more decisions than before. We're also aware that the evidence on guidance and what works in career guidance is better than ever. And the fact that you're having this conference today, there's a lot of activity around career guidance now, and that's a really good thing. And this afternoon, I'm running my own conference where we're presenting new evidence from national longitudinal data sets to show really compelling relationships between activities that young people do and better outcomes in the labour market. And so these are all sort of like important reasons for thinking that this is a good time for us to make this joint statement that now is the time to invest in career guidance, because during the pandemic last year in 2020, collectively we did a big survey of over 1,000 respondents from many different countries. And we asked them, guidance practitioners, policymakers, about the state of guidance during the pandemic. And one of the concerns that it raised is that we didn't get the impression that guidance was really seen as being something which was central to recovery plans. And we would all argue that it has a really important role to play to allow people to kind of make decisions for themselves, to demonstrate their own agency, to navigate what are becoming increasingly difficult decisions in face of a very challenging labour market. And so that was kind of the rationale. I think in the drafting process, it's important to be aware that the people who came together to do this, including Florian and Pedro, and we took advice from Ramo and others, as you see here. We all work in looking at the latest research and what's effective in guidance. We all work providing policy advice to governments. We're all acutely aware of the need to identify effective practice in light of kind of policy objectives and what the evidence has to say. And I think we've tried to create something which is effectively a summary of what the argument is for why guidance is probably more important now than it ever has been. More people staying in education, labour markets more dynamic, more decisions to make, more evidence that guidance works. And so we're making this as setting out what we feel is the argument for this. And within it, I think there are you'll find resources. You'll find a good summary of the different publications and tools and resources which the different international organisations have made available. And I think within it, I just probably emphasise one small aspect, which is important, connecting with the world of work. And I think this is something which is shared across all the organisations and is at the heart of this guidance. And what we'd say is that effective guidance really needs to connect people with the labour market. It's not just important to have information. Those individual experiences, individual activities are really important. So we made this available. I hope everybody finds it useful and helpful, and enjoy the rest of the conference. And thank you very much for giving me this time.
So thank you so much, Anthony, for this little interlude in which you provided the focus on this very important role. It's, as you said, it's really relevant that you have so many international organizations aligning perspectives and doing coordinated work. So I think it's also extremely relevant that we are, as you're saying, consulting and cooperating with civil society organizations, research organizations. So what I would simply say is that people should watch out for 2022 also in terms of what comes out of this cooperation. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So I would like to now advance to the final panel of the day, which is a panel which is tripartite, which has government representatives, social partners, also donors and development agencies. So it's quite an interesting panel in which we will look more into what to really prioritize when we are developing career development support systems, and how can these stakeholders contribute. So in this panel, we will have Mr. Mustafa Hakan Bushuk, who's the head of Educational Technologies Development and Project Department at the National Ministry of Education of Turkey. We will have Ms. Muriel Onti, Senior Vice President and Head of Government Affairs at the LHH, in the ADECO group. We'll have Team Noonan, who's Campaigns and Communications Director at the International Trade Union Confederation. Mr. Brajesh Pant, who's Chief of Education Sector Group at the Asian Development Bank. And we will have Ms. Alison Crabb from DG Employment, who's the head of the unit for the skills agenda at the European Commission. So a very good group of speakers, and we are all very pleased to have you here. So I would, without further ado, time is flying, I would ask to all of you the first big question. You know, what are the priorities? What should be privileged, prioritized to enhance career development systems so that they contribute to lifelong learning, to employability, so that they generate the best social and economic outcomes. So I would start with Mr. Bushuk, and I would ask you, all of you, to be quite disciplined with time, because it's a very, very rich program. So Mr. Bishop, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Pedro. Actually, I can say that one of the most important priority is the relevancy. I can say that because our system, our career development support system, should address the real or de facto needs of all users or beneficiaries, including government, industry, employers, individuals from deprived or disadvantaged or vulnerable groups. So it's important for our career development system to be relevant. So if we are talking about the relevancy, we need to focus on data-driven approach. So we need a nationwide, or we need a local need analysis for skills. We need to, but this need analysis should be continuous, not just once. It should be continued. It should be repeated regularly, so that we can have a skill map in a country or in a region, or at local level. We will have a skill map, let's say a heat map, an interactive heat map. This will be based on current data, and it will be updated regularly. When the governments start a need analysis, it nearly takes a year, and after the finalization of the need analysis, the needs have already been changed. So we need to look for new ways of analyzing the needs or depicting the needs. So a heat map, an interactive heat map, which can be integrated to career development system, is really important from my point of view. The first priority should be relevancy, and the second one, I can say that we need to adopt a data-driven approach, and we need to look for ways to update our data regularly. An interactive map can be done for this. And of course, we need to have a perception with higher resolution. We need to see the local needs. Even we need to see the individual needs. So we can design some tools to get the needs, to collect the needs of the individuals. It's really important because we are at the age of decentralization, and we need to focus on some technological solutions which will enable decentralization, because each human being has its own potential or own needs. So we need to adapt our systems, career development systems, to support all individuals. So personalization is also becomes important here. Our career development systems should have some personalized aspects, personalized properties. So we need to design it with some blockchain technology, and we need to support all the individuals. So last but not least, I can say that we should be inclusive. We should address all the needs of the individuals from right at the beginning of their training or education life, or employed or unemployed, or some people who are looking for new jobs, or some people who are intending to updating their skills. They can find relevant information or training in the career development systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You focused two very important aspects. On one hand, the labor market relevance. On the other hand, the need to address the personal characteristics, so the personal needs and the individualization of the service. So thank you very much for this. So we would proceed with Ms. Santi. So what would be your take from, let's say, from the perspective also of employers associations, and what are the priorities?
Thank you, Pedro. So yeah, thank you for the question. I think there are three major kind of priorities, but before I respond to this, just give me 2 minutes just to recap on a little context, so that will make it a little bit better understandable around that position. So we know, we've discussed at length, how the skills are changing and the end of career for life. There are more transitions than ever before. I think LinkedIn is saying 28% above pre-pandemic levels. So that makes it really important. But also workers have been challenged in the last 12 to 18 months around mental health. So what I want to say by that is that, there is a need for a stronger governance and ownership from the individuals on the one hand, but also employability can no longer rest on the skills and the skill set. It's much broader than that. And it's not just about guiding a person to the next job. Humans are not commodities. It's not about just the connection, which at times the career guidance can be understood under. So, the large transformation on the labor market makes it difficult to follow and orientate, but it's also, there are lots of reasons from an individual perspective to take on a certain journey or not. So if you ask me about how, what are the priorities, I think on the one hand, we need to address the broader needs and not just the skills and the direct guidance. So we need to acknowledge the fact that a better fit and aspiration, but also on the health side, will enable better job-to-job transitions, as well as provide the employers with stronger and job-ready talents that are very important and critical for the recovery and for taking up on the environmental challenges, but also digital transformation. Secondly, we need, and I alluded to already earlier in my introduction, we need to make sure that it is linked to employment. So an effective and an optimal public-private partnership at different levels, which includes, I would say, a new social contract. So as the entire, I would say, ecosystem, but actually all the different parties' requirements and rights are evolving, we need a new redefinition of the social contract. We've heard earlier from Flanders, this beautiful example, and this is a reference that I have been using, and a lot of us have been using in the past, which has served as an example for many others. I think we need to take advantage of these type of partnerships, but there are others that I'm happy to elaborate. There are some great initiatives in Singapore where the employer associations are joining public institutions and others on the skillings incentives. In Italy, with Confindustria leading on co-creating a fund for lifelong learning. So there are real examples here to let flourish. And the third piece on priorities would be, and I would come back to what has just been said on the data-driven approach, but I would add to boost awareness. The recent OECD report on career guidance and for adult learning has highlighted that workers not aware. It's, I think, roughly 2/3 of the adults are not taking on any opportunities to get career guidance, career coaching, because they don't think it is necessary. So I think there is a big need, there is a big work to be done. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much. This was such a rich contribution. I mean, so many important and strong ideas left, you know, a new social contract. And I have to say that I couldn't agree more. I mean, what's the point of having good services if people don't know they exist and do not access them? The one thing that I also recall is what you said at the beginning, this hiking image that you transmitted. I like these metaphors a lot too. And I recall one which is that, you know, you can lead people to just any route, like lemmings falling off a cliff, you know, but possibly what you want is people who are navigators. And as you say, people are not commodities. So what would this, I think, gives the perfect transition for the next speaker, Tim Noonan, who is going to talk on behalf of the trade unions. Tim, I give the floor to you. What do you think are the priorities from your side?
Thank you, Pedro. And it's indeed heartening. Muriel and I talk quite a lot, and it's indeed heartening to hear this common view about the need for a new social contract and the renewal of the social contract, and all of what that means. So I think priorities from our side are firstly to look very hard at these really critically important sectors, particularly care and health, and all things to do with climate action and decarbonisation. And we think that the career development and guidance really needs to connect very organically into these areas. Last week we heard the G7 trade ministers make a commitment to full employment. It's trade ministers, not labour ministers. It's very, very heartening to hear. By our calculation, that's close to 600 million jobs missing in the world economy. We know there's plenty of money in the world economy. It's more a question of how we can get that investment in employment growth. But those two big priority areas, care and climate action. There are also some questions which I would throw back. The first one is gender. We know that, of course, labour force participation globally is about 27% gender gap. The gender pay gap is stuck at more than 20%. And that the impacts of the pandemic have fallen disproportionately on women. We also see figures that say that as much as 2/3 of women who've at least temporarily left the workforce are not in education or training. So there's a real big important question for us there is, how is career guidance reaching women? What are your gender performance indicators as an industry? We also are mindful of the fact that many of the people who've lost their jobs, not all, but many are at the sort of have the fewest recognised skills. So we think that's an important priority for lifelong learning, but also for career guidance to reach those people. Not always easy to reach. Also, an assessment of the real reach of career guidance and development into the school to work transition. We know that this is something that's deeply embedded in the system. Interesting to know if there's any way of really developing metrics on that. And a couple of final things. One, how effective is the international cooperation? So this is a really good initiative, and we're hearing lots of interesting examples from people. So how do we carry on this with social dialogue to be able to assess some of the things that are new and that are emerging or that are changing, for example, vouchers? Really important for that sharing of experience, I think. The final point is I think a very important area, and it goes largely back to the climate question. It's the connection between career guidance and skills for transition. We know from the work that our Just Transition Centre does, and they engage in communities and sectors and cities to decarbonise and put production and services onto a low or zero carbon pathway. there is an assumption that moving from coal to wind and solar is a massive, massive job in terms of the different skills that are required. Not necessarily the case. So there are lots and lots of skills that already exist in quite carbon intensive areas that with the right reskilling can quite rapidly develop workforce capacity for low carbon production. So we think that that's a really important interface. And not only are the skills required, obviously, it's the pathways to those gears that connect workers with jobs through career guidance and development. Thank you.
So much, and once again, so many important points. Again, the point of reaching people, and that tends to be a very strong weakness in many systems, is not getting the service to the people who might benefit the most from it. I think that also this point about skills intelligence is absolutely fundamental. This that you're saying that, and that Mr. Burschut was also focusing, this, where are the hotspots, where are the pathways that people can take, is absolutely fundamental and an area which requires investment. I also believe that what you said about embedding career development in policy, larger policy packages and strategic packages. It's again the point that was made at the beginning, that it's not an add-on, it's a key component. So thank you so much for that. So I would pass on now to the donors and the development agencies. And I would first ask Mr. Brajesh. There's someone with, could you please close your microphone? Yes, thank you. Mr. Brajesh, I would ask you to provide also your perspectives regarding the priorities from the side of a big regional development bank. So welcome.
Thank you, Pedro. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. It's a great pleasure to join this panel. As pointed out by previous speakers, skills and jobs are changing rapidly due to digitalization and technological changes, urgency to ensure sustainable development at the backdrop of COP26 and disruptions from COVID-19. In this context, as various organizations have noted, career guidance is meant to promote lifelong learning, improve labor market outcomes, including reducing skills mismatches, and enhance social equity and social cohesion. The main purpose, the main policy objective or interest of governments is to reduce youth unemployment, increase productivity and earnings of workers, which will enhance the competitiveness, innovation, and sustainable growth of companies, which in turn leads to overall sustainable growth, including higher GDP, per capita income, and social cohesion. So second, many countries, particularly in South Asia, have high level of informal employment. It is important to shift to formal employment, which disproportionately affects women and disadvantaged groups. Informality is also closely linked with sectors like agriculture, where economic dependency remains high despite low productivity and earnings. Third, all learners in Tibet must have foundational skills to provide them with much better life choices. To turn all the citizens into lifelong learners, it is crucial to create opportunities for lifelong learning through reskilling and upskilling, and by creating flexible pathways and opportunities for career development. Finally, some learners always pursue entrepreneurship, which is important to generate new jobs. Entrepreneurship skills are important to nurture from the school level throughout the education system, and lifelong learning to promote innovation. ADB supports Tibet for at least 4 target groups: for those with little or limited formal schooling, for secondary education students where Tibet is part of school curriculum, and post-secondary learning of different types, including Tibet colleges and polytechnics, and reskilling and upskilling of the workforce as part of lifelong learning. So the group is quite diverse. To address these challenges, it is important to take an ecosystem approach that promotes whole of government and shared responsibility between citizens, career choice, companies, employee development, and government, youth career guidance, unemployment services, strategic workforce development, something like social contract we are talking about. Another area is to improve is governance, which includes labor, social education, and industry policy overlap. And the third dimension is the role of private sector in promoting startups, social enterprises, and business processes. Tibet comprises 1/3 of the share of ADB's total education lending of over $1 billion per year. We want to take a two-pronged approach, going back to the basics to get most vulnerable on a viable and decent career trajectory, formal employment, and as well as transformational approach to support our developing member countries to prepare agile workforce with opportunities for lifelong learning to remain resilient. For example, with increasing use of artificial intelligence and big data analytics, as has been emphasized, it is now possible to develop labor market intelligence system that can help to track emerging labor market information regarding changing occupations and matching this with job seekers based on their skills profile, as well as job centers and training providers. For example, JobCrate in Singapore does this, and more companies are emerging. Thank you. Back to you, Pedro.
Thank you so much. This is such an important signal, because you signaled the availability for a development bank to support the full integration and embeddedness in lifelong learning, and with a perspective for full system development in connection both with economic targets and social targets. And you're also emphasizing the realities of lower income countries, which may require stronger structural investment and efforts on this level. So I think this is a very important signal, and something that needs to be listened to by all the stakeholders involved in these processes. I would advance now, of course, to the European Commission in the role of a development agency. In this case, who cooperates on many levels to the development of systems, not only in Europe but outside. So I would then invite Ms. Alison Crabb to speak, and also provide her perspective on what are the priorities. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pedro, and thank you to ILO and ETF for opening up such an interesting space for discussion. This has been really fascinating so far. Very glad to share some thoughts from the perspective of the European Commission, and indeed in our work with member states, with social partners, and with stakeholders. Among all the priorities that have been mentioned in this panel, I think I would zoom in on one above all, which is driving our thinking within the European Commission on this issue of career development. And it's the absolute need to embed career development strategies within wider policy areas, and I can give a couple of thoughts as regards both youth and older people's upskilling and reskilling efforts, which are very much in the headlines at the moment. But I think when we look across the experience over decades of trying to tackle issues around career development, one very clear message emerges, and that is about the need to really integrate these efforts within broader policy reform and investment decisions, and so see them, very much not as an adjunct, an afterthought, but if there is to be a route to success, then it must be embedded within well thought out policy landscapes. Two I would mention then, one is certainly we've touched today on the urgent need to take a leap forward in adult upskilling and reskilling for the reasons that we've heard about this morning. The pandemic has been an accelerator. The digital and green transitions leave no other choice if we're going to build an environment in which growth is sustainable and fair and inclusive. So at EU level then, the work around helping adults with the lowest skills and qualifications to upskill, that's something that's happening through the so-called upskilling pathways. That's been going on for a few years now. And an integral part of that, of course, is reaching out to the lowest skilled adults with opportunities for, let's call it a skills scan or a skills audit, with the extent of support and guidance that they need there in order to help them get onto a tailored pathway for upskilling and indeed stepping up their employability and integration chances. So that's perhaps one example of a policy designed with skills development, career development at its heart. The other being, of course, the youth guarantee. So other end of the age spectrum, now applying to young people under 30 who are not in employment, education or training, and a real integral part, a building block of that initiative to reach out to those young people, give them a chance to step into either further learning, employment, apprenticeship, traineeship, is of course looking in a very tailored and personalized way with them at the skills that they have in their backpack, perhaps not reflected in a qualification, and how they will go further then on a further learning and employment pathway. So I think that would be my key message, looking across the experience of recent years of what can be most successful in this area, is really building in as a well thought through element of skills development systems, skills reforms, and of course driving skills investment decisions then, building this in from the very start.
Thank you so much. The European Commission has been paving the way for policy initiatives, and of course is an example to observe carefully and look at. There are many recent developments that deserve attention linked to career development support. What I would like to ask you all now, because we have so little time for such an interesting conversation, is just to zoom in a little bit and provide some insight, just flesh out in 2 minutes in a telegraphic fashion. What do you think that your stakeholders can do, from the perspective of course, of the group that you are representing? So I would ask first Mr. Bushuk to speak just very quickly about what do you believe that the government, the state can do, and how can it cooperate so that career development really becomes this embedded part of lifelong learning policies, of employment policies, etc. Please.
Thank you very much. First of all, the government or states should should create the ecosystem for career development systems, in which they can be integrated or embedded. This ecosystem should be facilitated or empowered by the government. So this is the key task of the governments. I work for the Minister of National Education. We need to create our own ecosystem, and we need to look for the solutions of the skills gaps, skills mismatch. So just we had started a new project. We are focusing 10,000 disadvantaged schools, and we are aiming at increasing the quality of education. Those disadvantaged students can improve themselves, and we are going to focus the teachers upskilling. But on the other hand, we will need a framework, we will need a policy. These are all important, but the most important thing is facilitator role, designer role of the government. We need to design a suitable ecosystem that will empower all those endeavors of career development systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And as I believe that we are also speaking about the way in which the government will cooperate with its key partners. One of them being, of course, the employers. And I asked Ms. Antti to say, from the side of the employers organizations, how can cooperation initiatives be developed so that, for example, we enhance career development in enterprise environments, or, for example, have better practices in the training sector? What would you have to say about that?
Thank you. I think the two elements to that. On the one hand, we should continue to take part, as my colleague was saying, around this ecosystem. So the role of employers is really important in that context, and taking active part in this ecosystem to build the future career development and frameworks. And I mentioned earlier a few examples of where it's already happening, and I think what we need to continue doing is exactly what you, Pedro, and thank you so much, and Florian, you're giving us the opportunity to exchange on this. So having more exchange on these best practices so that we can continue to enhance those. And the other aspect is certainly, if we look inside the employers, is continue to raise awareness and enable employees to adopt a lifelong learning mindset so that they can become more self-sufficient and be more aware of the offerings that are out there for them, and taking recognition of the different sizes and needs of the various employers. Some of them might be more aware and be able to advance on their own, but the others will be very reliant on active labor market policies and further examples that have been mentioned today around career guidance proposed by public entities.
So you would say it's a shared responsibility?
There is a part of responsibility, of course, that employers share, but of course we are by far not alone. And as I said, the mindset of workers is very important, that they can take that step, and also we are part of the ecosystem.
So another important, very important part of the ecosystem are, of course, the trade unions. Tim, Tim Noonan, so what would you have to say from your side? How can the trade unions contribute to enhance this career development support to workers? There's also the support that all the unemployed and more vulnerable groups will need during this period of recovery. As you were emphasizing, the just transition is important in this context of search for economic growth. Could you please just specify quickly a few dimensions?
Yes, I think, thank you, Pedro. I think, firstly, in many countries, the trade unions are actually important providers of skills and deeply engaged in actually delivering in areas like construction, many other areas. So I think we need to take that into account. And it also reinforces our capacity to engage in social dialogue, in collective bargaining, but also to push for the embedding and the investment in skills and career guidance, which is so obviously necessary. I think the other important point for us comes out of the 2019 ILO Centenary Declaration, which was unanimously adopted by employers, workers' organisations and governments. And that includes what we call the labour protection floor, which guarantees for all workers a floor of rights, safe and healthy work, maximum hours, working hours, and an adequate minimum wage. We need to also be very cognizant of what kind of jobs are we recommending people to take up, and where are people ending up in all of this. A colleague from the ADB mentioned the importance of formalizing informal work. There's this constant tension between formality and informality, even in the richest countries. And it's very important that we use that ILO labour protection floor out of the 2019 declaration as a kind of fundamental floor below which things shouldn't fall. So this whole sector, it's very important to consider what kind of jobs people are being, what are the conditions, what are the standards. We are ready, our member organisations are involved in social dialogue, they're collectively bargaining these issues on a daily basis. And as I said, everything we can do to embed career guidance and to ensure that the necessary investment is there, we will do that.
Excellent. This is very promising for the upcoming discussion, also during the International Labour Conference. I look forward to that. Now I would pass on also to the donor organizations and the development agencies. So, Mr. Pant, from your side, what do you believe that the large regional development bank can do specifically in terms of consolidating and enhancing the role of career development support in these large policy packages? Please.
Yeah, Pedro, let me give you some examples. Several projects funded by ADB feature career guidance. For example, ADB funded Skills for Employment project in Mongolia. Learning and career guidance was integrated in grades 8 and 9, the last 2 grades of junior secondary education, to prepare students to take informed choice between general senior secondary education and TVET, and advanced elective courses in general secondary, senior secondary education, whose introduction was also proposed under the project. 2 output targets, development of learning and career guidance modules and materials, and 8th, 9th grade teacher training, 90% of all teachers, and 1 outcome target, 8th and 9th grade students in all schools receive learning and career guidance were fully met in the first 3 years. Based on this success, the Ministry of Education and Science expanded learning and career guidance in grade 10 through 12 with project support. In the Philippines, the ADB is funding facilitating work, school to work program, which is providing enhanced career advocacy, job matching, employment coaching, and career guidance services for job seekers through the Philippines Employment Services offices, with a target of reducing NEET rate, youth unemployment rate, and reducing the median time for female youth school to work transition. Also in the Philippines, in the Job Start program, ADB helped to expand employment services centers across local government units. Key activities included improving labor agency capacity and expand services and expanding training and apprenticeship schemes for at-risk youth, focus BPO and tourism and job skills. So we have to look at also for some priority sectors. And there are many portals, which are really coming up, and they provide really good way of aggregating these services. So I think if we can integrate, as mentioned earlier, through ecosystem approach backed with good data information system, I think a lot can be achieved. Back to you.
I think one important aspect that I take from what the observations is this information you provide is the fact that there is quite a bit of targeting in these projects in addressing specific aspects of the systems, which also implies that there is knowledge about what are the behind this support of what are the needs of the system, what are the faults in the provision, the gaps, what do individuals need, so that there is a preliminary diagnosis exercise that frames these investments. And I think that's important, besides, again, the important signal that there is support to the development of all these components in an ecosystem framework. So lastly, I would also ask Ms. Alison Krapp to provide her perspective also from the side of the European Commission, exactly the same question, from as a development agency, what you think can be done and is being done to consolidate this role. Just zoom in a bit. Thank you.
Thanks, Pedro. So in addition to the policy context that we've been talking about, of course, hand in hand with that comes the funding support and making sure that the policy reform ambitions are rightly reflected in the EU funding programs. And that goes, of course, inside the EU and beyond the borders of the EU. So lots of interesting work underway at the moment, for example, around youth guarantee in the Eastern Partnership countries in the Western Balkans, which I think is, if one digs into that, exactly picking up on the type of policy ambitions we've been talking about this morning: capacity building, system reform, and really tailoring towards individuals. Inside the Union then, I would say exciting at the moment is the so-called Recovery and Resilience Facility, the big 670 billion facility available to member states to programme for a fair recovery. One of the big strands of that is upskilling and reskilling, and really integrated into the guidance to member states on how to programme those funds is a clear message on the importance of career development as a part of skills reform. And perhaps my last thought on all of this, whether it's the policy work that we're doing, or indeed the funding support, is the absolutely crucial role of tripartite cooperation and the social partners, because as ever, when we're talking about skills reform and skills development, that really is at the key. And I think it's come through all the messages in this panel, whether it's been about building up evidence and skills intelligence, reaching out to the workforce, building up sustainable partnerships. Of course, all of that really is anchored in strong social dialogue and tripartite cooperation.
Thank you so much, Alison, and so correct. Again, the point of ecosystem, the point of tripartite cooperation, this joint work, which also, of course, can involve and should involve other parts of civil society, like the professional, the organizations, the practitioners themselves, etc., so that the services is well targeted. I think I have to thank you all for excellent contributions and for being so disciplined with the time. So good, very good timekeeping. Thank you so much. And we are drawing now close to the end of the meeting. I think we've been having quite a good, full, very rich meeting. A lot of information, perspectives, a lot of points coming through about what is this balance that needs to be achieved between the search for productivity and growth and access to learning and decent work, to balance also the social outcomes, the embeddedness, the importance, and the ways to embed career development in the general skills ecosystem, the need for awareness raising. So there is indeed the need to make good choices, well thought through choices, based also on an appropriate diagnosis of what is necessary to do, with not only a short-term perspective, but also a long-term perspective, looking into the structural transformation that we're currently having, and this transition being brought forth by decarbonization, by digitalization of these big trends, also demographic trends. I think that one aspect that was important was also that it was focused that the skills development component, the attitude development component of career development, that I think will enable also to a large extent the necessary context to achieve this new, better normal that we all wish for. So I will just briefly focus on certain things that the ILO is doing, and then tell Florian to do the same about the ETF, just to close this meeting. We, as has been focused, we have now this shared methodology with ETF that will enable us precisely to support this process of diagnosis to countries who want to adhere to it, of course. And both organizations are available to help countries understand where are the gaps and the potentials in the systems, to help subsequent planning and development capacitation stage. We have a report coming out at the end of the year regarding the results of the first reviews we've made. We'll have also an interesting policy guidance piece on the development of career development or career guidance digital services. And starting next week, we will have training on the International Training Center, centered on the International Training Center in Turin, which is also a cooperation of the ILO and ETF, and possibly there will be new editions. Besides that, there are diverse resource guides that the ILO creates and that can help, let's say, develop the capacity on many elements of career development systems. So Florian, I pass over to you also to provide you the opportunity to speak a bit about ETF initiatives.
Thanks a lot, and many thanks to the ILO in general and Pedro here in particular, and thanks to all the speakers of today to share their interesting practices and expertise. Very briefly, our director in the beginning mentioned it already. So ETF is integrating the topic of career guidance and in the broader sense career development support into all of its activities. So that might be the centers of vocational excellence, that might be the new monitoring framework ETF is using, Torino process is maybe a term that many of you know, to analyze the skill systems in the countries. Very briefly, what we're doing concretely from November this year onwards, and then also next year, we're conducting the reviews of national career development support systems in the Eastern Partnership countries, and we also plan to do it in the Western Balkan countries to have a proper, sound evidence base to inform planning and policy discussions in the countries. Saying that, this is today a starting point of kicking off the policy exchange on that topic. A last reference, tomorrow there is another event called Innovation and Adaptation of Active Labor Market Policies to Changing Economic and Social Conditions. We are posting a link here in the chat. Feel free to join that as well. It is related, obviously. And last but not least, feel free to fill in the feedback form to give us feedback on how you experienced that event today. We will respond to open questions that have not been answered in the chat in a follow-up message together with the speakers. So thanks to all of you, and fruitful continuation of the work in that area of career development support. Thank you all.